to do is exactly what is yours to do. So this morning, I want to speak a little bit. The daily word was listen. Listen for Spirit to speak to you and through you. So here we talk a lot about the various senses and how to know God. Maybe we're clairvoyant, but we don't even know it. We all are, you know. We just haven't recognized it. Some have recognized their gifts. We all are clairsentient. So we're going to talk this morning about being clairaudient. You hear the word of God. Can you hear the divine voice? You do. You hear it every single day. And your intuition is one of the main ways. The Spirit is guiding you at all time. So how do we hear the divine? Intuition, inner feelings, divine guidance, inner knowings. It's the voice of God, always available to us. Direct us to our higher good. One of the most powerful ways we can become consciously aware is to cultivate that ability to recognize the voice of God. And the question is not whether the signals are there, but whether we're living in the right frequency to receive them. That's the question. That's the only question. When we are, we have a direct experience of listening to the divine. So is there a way to cultivate this inner listening? Is there a way to get on the right frequency to receive them? Is there a way to know? I know there is. But it takes dedication, it takes desire, and it takes practice. Jonas Salk once said, "Intuition will tell the thinking mind where to look next." One of our highest faculties is intuition. And it comes to a point sometimes where we instantly know without the intellect ever being involved. You only need to look at nature to realize this, don't you? How about the brush turkey in Australia? I've talked about it before. I'm going to repeat it again. Once a year at mating time, the male brush turkey in Australia gathers piles of brush and leaves, and he and his mate build a mound together on the ground. This mound becomes the nest for the eggs. The female lays her eggs in the nest and sits on them. And it's the male's job to keep the nest at a certain temperature by adding and removing leaves every single day. You see, the eggs will hatch only if the temperature in the nest remains constant. So during the day, when the sun is high, he removes leaves from the nest. In the evening, as night falls and the temperature drops, he adds leaves. Isn't that amazing? We take so many things for granted. Scientists have studied these birds and have found that the temperature in those nests never varies more than 1 degree. Never. Amazing, huh? How does the male brush turkey know how to regulate the temperature so precisely? Because of that inner knowing. The salmon's soul signal tells him to swim upstream at spawning time. The homing pigeon's soul signal tells him where to come home. And the monarch butterfly Nature has infused the monarch with a similar innate and instinctive sense of direction. In the fall, hundreds of thousands of them migrate south. They gather on tree trunks and large branches to hibernate, although they've never been to those places before. They leave in the spring, never to return. They wing their way north to lay their eggs and pass on. And miraculously, their offspring have the same intuition. The amazing things, amazing, that we take for granted every day. So don't you think that same soul signal system might be encoded within our true nature as well? Do you think that we're less equipped than the turkey, the salmon, the homing pigeon, and the butterfly, just to name a few? I would say no. GE's Director of Research, G.C. Soot, once stated, "After preparing yourself in your chosen field, you must be alert to hunches and keep an open mind. Do not rely too much upon logic. Try to locate the treasure chest of ideas which lies hidden within you." Isn't that lovely? I love that treasure chest. The synchronicities and signals lie within us. It's a divinely natural faculty within every single one of us. But when we don't realize, we're just like the people about whom Jesus was talking when he said, "Ye have eyes and see not. Ye have ears and hear not." And it may sound obvious, but this is critical. If you don't believe that it's possible, that there is a higher intelligence out there that desires your best, you are likely not to ever see it. So be willing and open. So if you think there are signals for you to catch, you won't be able to tune into the frequency to catch them. God, in innate intelligence, puts these signals in all of us. All of us. Be consciously open and willing to see and hearing those soul signals by first realizing that you have them. Internal guidance comes in many forms: inklings, hunches, promptings, urgings, maybe out of the blue. You may feel inspired to phone someone about a job, a project, a social connection. There may be no apparent reason that you can see for doing that, and you'll see later if you follow the hunch. But just as the Mazda motto affirmed, it just feels right. Mm-hmm. We know how that feels, don't we? When something just feels right. It feels like home. It feels comfortable. It just feels right. A couple were searching for a dog to join their family, and they found the cutest dog online. And when the man called to ask about it, the owner said that the puppy had already been promised to a woman who was to pick it up the next morning. Well, they were so disappointed. And the next morning he said that for no apparent reason he decided to call the woman again. And she informed him that the woman that was supposed to come and pick up the puppy didn't come. So if you still want the puppy, she said, he's yours. Well, they were just over delighted, and he was so glad. Can you imagine how easily he wouldn't have made that call? But his intuition told him, call. And they've now enjoyed that puppy, now mature dog, for many, many years, and they're so glad for the inspiration. So the more you practice listening to your hunches and acting upon them, the more positive results you will observe, and the stronger this vital capacity will become in your life. I was reading a little story from the Tao. There was one of Lao Tse's students who said, "When I arrived at the master's cottage, I did not want him to see me so upset. Surely he realized I'd lost the way. But the moment I greeted him, I knew my facade had failed." "What's the matter?" the master said. I shook my head, trying to put him off. Instead, he reached for his walking stick and said, "Let's take a walk." The master, old now, yet still spry, linked his arm under my elbow and guided me through his herb garden to the edge of the bamboo forest that bordered his little parcel of land. And immediately, the hypnotic sound of the bamboo stalks clicking against each other in the wind began to relax me. We stepped into this mystical kingdom and strolled silently along the path, softly carpeted by fallen leaves. "Now what is it?" he asked me. I took a breath and began to vent. "A few days ago," I said, "I went down to the dock to see if I could get some work to earn money to make my journey to come see you, Master. There I found a leathery-skinned man supervising some younger guys hauling fish from a boat. I asked him if he had any work for me. 'Are you strong?' he asked. 'Certainly,' I said. 'Will you show up for work?' 'Yes.' 'I am very dependable,' I answered. 'Very well then,' he said. 'Start now. Work for me for the next 2 days. I will pay you on the third morning.'" Lao Tse already began to see the thread of this story. He had an inkling of where it was going to go. So he asked, "What did you feel about this man that hired you? What was your first instinct and inclination?" So I answered him and said I had a bad feeling about him. He was gruff and had a dark look in his eyes. I didn't like him, and something inside told me this was not going to work out well. His first instinct. "Then why did you not listen to your instinct?" the master said. "Well, I was truly afraid that if I didn't get the job, I would not have the money to come see you. I also wanted to trust the way, the Tao. I figured that if the way had brought me to this man, there must be a reason." By now we were well into the bamboo forest, bathed in deep shadow. The master ambled slowly at my side, listening attentively to my tale of woe. And then I worked hard for 2 days, returned the next morning for my wages, but the man and his boat were not there. I searched for him for a while, but to no avail. Finally, I asked another if he had seen my boss. He said he sailed away at sunrise with his crew. He won't be back. Hearing that, I grew furious. I had worked so hard, and I trusted this man, and he cheated me. I remained upset for my entire journey here. Without money, I had to beg for food. Fortunately, people were kind and offered me rice and vegetables. One family took me for lunch. I hoped to be rid of my anger by the time I arrived to see you, but I could not hide from your knowing eyes. Just then we reached a small clearing. The master sat down on a large rock and motioned for me to do the same. You are correct, he said. The Tao did bring you together with that man for a reason. It's just not the reason you thought. I looked at him with consternation. When you had a bad feeling about working for that man, that was the Tao giving you guidance. You chose to override that intuition because you were afraid about money. You listened to your fear instead of the way. You made an unwise assumption that just because you were brought to that man, you were supposed to work with him. How many of us have a similar story? If we're alive, we have a story like that to tell, haven't we? Excuse me. And if we're wise, we learn, don't we? We learn from that. We learn to trust our intuition. People will show you who they are. Now, what fear do you have? That you're not listening to your guidance? It's a fear of money, fear of being alone, a fear of there never being enough. It's all from fear. So we listen to fear instead of the voice of God. And we'll make those type decisions. So the master shook his head and laid his hand upon mine. Don't be too hard on yourself, he said. This is the teaching of a lifetime. You must be eternally grateful. Now, bless the man and let him go. Bless him and let him go on his own way. Let it go. So when we experience things like this, we recognize that sometimes a seeming loss can be a gain. Are we willing to open our eyes, open our ears? Are we willing to listen? We must be open if we're to hear the voice of God. We must be open. There's another little Zen story of a man that has come to a Zen master. And he wants to gain as much knowledge from the Zen master as he possibly can. But the minute he steps over the threshold, he begins regaling the Zen master with all that he knows, and it's a lot. Out of his mouth comes paragraph after paragraph after page after page. And the Zen master finally decides he needs to put an end to this. This could go on all day. We've heard this story in so many different ways, and you'll recognize it immediately as he gets out his pot of water to make tea. And as he does so into the man's cup, he pours and pours and pours, and it overflows and overflows and overflows. And the man says, well, the professor, the cup is full. It can't hold any more. What can we learn from that? If I'm already so full, I can't learn, then I may as well end my spiritual journey right now, because we're learning every day of our lives. Every single day we're learning. And the more open we are and the more receptive we are, the gentler the lessons will be. And I believe that with all my heart. Spend enough time in the silence to recognize your higher guidance. Mary Morrissey, in her book, Building Your Field of Dreams, writes, calmly, clearly, and without judgment. Our inner voice is always ready to help us move toward our highest good. Always. We're just not ready to listen. Remember, God can do for us only what God can do through us. Willingly follow your voice, the voice of God, even if you would rather sit home and fret. And it's critical that you act on your guidance for two reasons. The first is the obvious one, because it will lead you to your highest good. And the second is, you strengthen the signal every time you act upon it. Every time. So the next time, it gets stronger, stronger, and stronger. But the question still remains, how do I know this is a signal from my soul or the divine? How do I know if it's divine intuition, guidance, and not just my ego, or wounded, fear-based perceptions of life talking to me? We can ask ourselves this question: does what I am hearing empower me, and it does no intentional harm to another? Do I feel empowered? It's really quite simple. The voice of God within us. The voice of God is never one of correction, punishment, discipline, or scolding. It never contaminates, condemns, or seeks to harm. It's always empowering. It's honest and based on integrity. And if what you're following is not based on integrity, you need to let it go. So it starts with the free will. And if you feel at all interested in learning more about your intuition, then you are being divinely guided to do so. If you are here any way, shape, or form at Unity today, whether it's in person, online, or watching the video later, if you've had an inclination to improve your life, you're already on the way. Because we teach spiritual truths, we do everything possible to separate our ego and fear out of what we teach here. We do it consistently. So listening for the voice of God, you have to first realize that there is higher guidance and it is available. Be willing and open to receive the signals. Quiet the ego mind. Spend time in the silence, wherever that is. You may have your own sacred space at home. Most of us do. It may be in your car. It may be anywhere. Anywhere. Carve time to go into the silence so that you can recognize higher guidance when it comes. Be an observer. Please observe from a higher place how Spirit has already worked in your life. You know it has. You can look back on your life and say, wow, wasn't that a miracle how that worked out there? Whoever would have guessed? Whoever would have guessed? And even right in the midst of it, what you learn as you go along the path is even in the midst of it, the lesson you already begin to see. What you're gleaning from it, what the planet is gleaning from it. So in the midst of that, as you practice, you will learn to trust totally, completely. No matter what the appearances are in the outside world, you will trust no matter what. Always. Whatever comes your way. So this morning, as we've had this sacred time together, and I say thank you for sharing your time, your life with me, your sacred time. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open. Thank you for being willing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your intuition by coming to see us and to be with us this morning. Have a blessed week, and thank you for your time.